Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel where I'm going to be breaking down how I made my Sweetener sweater. If you don't know what Sweetener is, it's Ariana Grande's latest album, which came out in August, and I started working on this sweater in July as we were getting ready for the album release. So it all started with a photograph of Ariana by Dave Meyers from the Sweetener album shoot. It's her sitting on the steps. It's really pretty. She's looking up, kind of hopeful. And so I took the photo and I cropped it because I knew I couldn't stitch the whole thing. I cropped it so it was just about at her mid-chest. You kind of see her shoulder, her ponytail, and some of her jacket. And then after kind of doing that crop and cutting her out of the background, I decided to try to vectorize the image in Illustrator, because when it comes to embroidery, you want to kind of simplify your colors. So I started off with the vector. As you can see, the vector is like a little bit kind of splotchy. You lose some of the definition in the lines. The shadow on her face and her neck just kind of becomes one, and while it's cool and artistic, it just wasn't really what I had in mind for the sweater. So after creating that image, I decided to create some line art, and I used the hair from the vector and colored the darkest part this navy blue, and then I traced over her features with a pen in Photoshop in the dark blue to create line art. That way I could kind of simplify the design into something that could easily be stitchable. So after creating the line art, I decided, you know what, this is the image that I want to work with. I've simplified my colors down. I had it into a dark navy to lavender, purples to white or cream color scheme. So I knew that was kind of where I wanted to go. So when it came to the actual stitching and the beginning of it, I just started out by just printing out pretty basic, just printout of the design. It was about the size that I wanted, and then I cut it out, and then was kind of stuck as opposed to how I was supposed to progress. And so I was like, well, I need something as her skin tone. And so my mother had these canvas shoe bags that were kind of the right. They weren't, an exact skin tone, but they would be easily recognizable in the design as a skin tone. So I took the shoe bag, and using my invisible ink pen, I just traced the outline of the picture, the printout that I had cut out, onto the shoe bag, and then I proceeded to cut out the shoe bag and start my design. So then after cutting out the shoe bag, I lightly traced and drew her features and everything, which you can see in faint blue on the left, and I chose my colors. I went to the store and I picked up a dark navy, a couple different lavenders, and a couple other things, and a cream. So the colors that I used specifically that I can remember from this picture and from my kit, I used all DMC thread. I used 3865 for her hair. It's a white cream color, off-white, really, really pretty. I used 3747 as one of the lavenders in her hair, and the dark navy was 938. Now, as time went on and I, was finishing up her hair and her ponytail, I kind of added more colors in randomly. So I also added a 160, which is not pictured here, but it's in the sweater, and there's a couple others, random ones. I had picked up a sparkly kind of silver thread, which you can see in the picture, but I just decided after a couple tries that it just was going to be too difficult to work with, and it just wasn't working well with the material and the shoe bag and the canvasy shoe bag, and so I just scrapped it in the end. So after cutting it out and drawing it in, I began to stitch the hair, and my mother said that I should put a basting stitch into the shoe bag. So we used a special kind of spray-on glue to place the design in temporarily, but when you're putting it in and out of the hoop, it just gets discombobulated. So we put a basting stitch in, which is just like a really basic running stitch, nothing fancy. It's just to keep the two materials from coming apart too much while you're stitching and causing too much bunching up. So I began to stitch. So I stitched the hair at the top of the ponytail, and then I began to stitch the face. Now when it comes to stitching things like this, the key is to work from the inside out, which is that way you can work out any bubbles or creases in the fabric. So I started with her right eyebrow and her nose and some of the top of the head just to get the fabric down, and then continued to progress and eventually did her whole face. Now, if I was going to do this again, I would do things differently because her face did end up getting bunchy. It's still bunchy now. It's not as bad as it was, but it's just I didn't really go about it the most professional way, and so it still is kind of bunchy. After getting the face down and her hair, I began to bead the top of the sweater, just because that line where her face and the shoe bag and the stitching was just really uneven. I just wanted something that was pretty, that could offset all the kind of chaos and hopefully kind of reinforce that edge and make sure that it kind of stayed down. So I went in with some white beads. I think they were size 10 beads. Yeah, they're check seed beads, size 10, and just using a beading needle and some clear plastic thread, just beaded them on. The plastic thread is really annoying, but it's the only thread that I could find that was small enough to fit through the bead holes and with the needles, so it is what it is. It's not my favorite thing to use, but it gets the beads on, and that's the important part. So after the beading, I did a little more of a ponytail, and then I decided to start working on the lettering. So as you can see in this picture, there's this black thing hanging out the side. So this sweater was originally from a friend of mine's brother's bar mitzvah, and so it has the logo from his bar mitzvah on it, so I wanted to cover that up. No offense. So I decided to do the Sweetener font, or at least a version of it, in my embroidered style using the dark navy 938. And as you can see in the story, Sweetener was just 3 days away, so I was definitely feeling really excited for the album, and so I was pushing through. So it was my first time doing lettering. I think it came out actually decently well. I was a little bit nervous, but you can see that it clearly resembles the font. I tried to get some of the spacing correct and some of the serifs and stuff, so I think that it in the end turned out really well for my first attempt. So now the album came out, I'm working on it, and so I decided to cover that remaining graphic with a lily, because they are a flower that's associated with August, the month that Sweetener came out, and I wanted to have something that was a natural element that kind of played off of the colors in the hair. So I drew out the lily, and then I began to stitch the lily. It took a really long time. It was a satin stitch, so if you know satin stitch, you know that it is, you can't do big long stitches with it. You have to do pretty concise stitches, so it did take quite a long time to do, and so it took me quite a few weeks to actually get it done. A reminder is that I don't work on these sweaters necessarily consistently. I'll work on it for a week or two and really kind of get a design down, or just, I'll plan it out and I'll let it sit for a little bit, but I usually don't work on a sweater consistently, which is why it usually takes me so long to finish a sweater. So this sweater I started in July, and I didn't finish it until early November of 2018. So it did take quite a long time. It's still not technically finished, and this is where the sleeves come in. So I decided to add these graphics to the sleeves. My mom had some fabric that you could print on, so I photoshopped these 3 pictures that were from the Sweetener shoot, and photoshopped the little purple border, made them all black and white, and printed them out on this printable fabric. They got a little bit streaky, but I just decided to roll with it because it wasn't a professional thing. It was just a fun idea. And then I began to stitch them. Now I did this it's this trick I saw on YouTube, which is where you take the regular embroidery thread without separating it, a big needle, you do a back stitch, and then you go over the back stitch with a needle with just with the thread separated, and it creates this kind of raised stitch or raised line that is really cool for kind of creating a depth within the embroidery. So it's my first time trying that. It took a really long time because you have to go over every single detail with the thread, so it really does take quite a long time. So I kind of took breaks from it and worked on the lily a little bit more and started to bead outside the lily. As you can see here, I've kind of wrapped it around the letters now, and I've done the stem and the little pod inside. I did the same method that I tried on the sleeve graphics, where I did the thick thread and then covered it with thin thread. So it is raised, which helps again create depth and kind of differentiate between all the different lines and colors that are going on. And then I took another huge break from it for a lot of reasons, just because I was also just ready to wear it out and kind of let people see it, and it did take a long time, and I figured it was at a point where it was done enough. So after that, I came back to it in November when Ariana dropped Thank You Next, her latest single, and I was in the craft store and I came across this insane neon green thread that I had never seen before, and I was just so, inspired by it that I got 2 things of it, and I came home and I was like, what am I gonna put this on? And I realized that, it was kind of a stretch, but the neon green and the lavender may really go well together with the navy blue. So I decided to add the neon green to the Sweetener sweater by just creating some leaves outside of the lily, which helped just kind of center the design, add something fresh to it. And then I had the bottom of the design, which I had stitched down, but I had yet to really kind of figure out what I was going to do with it. It kind of was a little bit, a centimeter or 2 higher than the pocket of the sweater. So I had this white yarn lying around, and I decided, well, what if I did yarn clouds? Because, Ariana Grande likes clouds. And I figured I could do this thing where if I stitched through the yarn as I was kind of wrapping it around in these circle formations, I could kind of get this cloud feel. And yarn is fun, and it's a different texture that I was introducing to the project, which I thought was interesting just to have that on the bottom, and it helps kind of bridge the gap between the bottom of the graphic and the top of the pocket, as well as securing the bottom of the graphic even more. So I started that, and then I decided to do the line art for the clouds with the neon green to kind of just tie it down, finish the lily, and then the last thing to do is just finish a ponytail. So I decided to just finish the ponytail, and then she was done. So the Sweetener sweater for right now is finished. I have a graphic and a half left to embroider down onto the sleeve, but I've just decided at this point it's ready to wear, kind of wear it around. People really like it, and so I wanted to make this video just to kind of break down my process, how I stitched it. It was really random. I floated around a lot. I would work on one part and then go back and forth. So there's no correct way. As you can see in the picture, it's still bunchy. I've kind of just decided to just live with it. It adds a different texture. If I was going to do it again, I'd probably do a better job of appliquing the fabric down or, stitching it down. But for right now, I think it came out pretty well for this project. And yeah, so that's my Sweetener sweater. Stay tuned on this channel for more videos about embroidery. I have a video coming up where I have a new sweater that I'm working on, that I'm fully documenting the process so that you can see everything from me photoshopping to me stitching and how I go about that. So I'm really excited for that. So stick around. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, hit the like button. And if you want to subscribe, that'd be really cool too. We'd love to have you. Yeah, thanks for sticking around. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon.